Welcome to Christmas Stories for Sleep, where we drift away on gentle tales of love, hope, and holiday magic. Tonight's story takes us to a snow-covered mountain lodge, where a stressed city event planner discovers that sometimes the most beautiful celebrations happen when we stop trying to control every detail and let Christmas magic guide our hearts. So settle in, close your eyes, and let yourself be transported to the peaceful world of the Lakeside Lodge, where love blooms like winter roses and Christmas dreams come true. The sound of Jessica Thorne's heels clicking against the marble floor of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel echoed through the ballroom as she coordinated the final details of the Pemberton corporate gala. The sound of Jessica Thorne's heels clicking against the marble floor of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel echoed through the ballroom as she coordinated the final details of the Pemberton corporate gala. Her black wool coat was perfectly tailored, her blonde hair swept into an immaculate chignon, and her tablet clutched against her chest like armor. 3 servers rushed past carrying champagne flutes while she barked instructions into her Bluetooth headset. No, the ice sculptures go by the east wall, not the west, she said, her breath forming small clouds in the December air that seemed to follow her everywhere. And someone needs to tell the string quartet that Pachelbel's canon is absolutely forbidden. Mrs. Pemberton was very specific about that. The ballroom buzzed with controlled chaos, exactly the way Jessica liked it. Every detail had been planned months in advance, every contingency accounted for. This was her domain, where perfection wasn't just expected, it was delivered. Her assistant, Everly Morales, appeared at her elbow with a steaming cup of coffee and a worried expression. "Jessica, you have that call in 5 minutes." "What call?" Jessica frowned, checking her phone. She lived by her calendar, and unexpected calls were like unwelcome surprises. Something to be eliminated. The one about the Christmas wedding. Remember? Royalty Hall called yesterday about her last-minute celebration. Jessica's perfectly penciled eyebrows drew together. Royalty Hall, daughter of tech mogul Richard Hall, had indeed called about hosting a Christmas wedding. Jessica had assumed it would be at one of the usual venues, the Plaza, the Four Seasons, somewhere civilized and predictable, somewhere with proper heating and backup generators. Her phone buzzed, and she answered on the first ring. "Thorne Events, this is Jessica." "Jessica, thank goodness." Royalty's voice carried that particular breathless quality of brides everywhere, but amplified by what sounded like champagne and excitement. "I know this is terribly last minute, but we've found the most magical place for the wedding. It's absolutely perfect, rustic and romantic and completely authentic." A cold dread settled in Jessica's stomach. In her experience, when clients used words like rustic and authentic, they usually meant lacking in basic amenities and impossible to work with. "Where exactly are we talking about?" Jessica asked, motioning for Everly to bring her the tablet with Royalty's file. "It's called the Lakeside Lodge. It's this gorgeous retreat up in Pine Valley, right on Crystal Lake. Marco and I drove up there last weekend and fell absolutely in love. Snow-covered mountains, pristine lake, the most charming log cabin architecture. It's like something out of a Christmas card." Jessica's fingers flew over her tablet screen, pulling up images of the Lakeside Lodge. What she saw made her stomach clench. While undeniably beautiful, with its rustic log construction and stunning mountain backdrop, it looked like exactly the kind of place that would have questionable Wi-Fi, unpredictable plumbing, and absolutely no understanding of the complex logistics required for a proper wedding. "The wedding is in 8 days, Royalty continued, oblivious to Jessica's growing panic. "Christmas Eve, isn't that romantic? We'll have the ceremony outdoors by the lake, weather permitting, and the reception in the main lodge. Oh, and Jessica, the forecast is calling for snow. Real snow, not the fake stuff we used at the Hamptons party." Jessica closed her eyes and counted to 3. Snow meant variables. Variables meant complications. Complications meant disasters. "How many guests?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled. "Just 50. Very intimate. Close family and friends only. The lodge can accommodate everyone overnight." It has these adorable little cabins scattered around the property, like a Christmas village. 50 guests, staying overnight at a remote lodge during a snowstorm. Jessica made rapid calculations in her head, catering logistics, transportation issues, backup plans for outdoor ceremonies, heating concerns for guest cabins, and the 1,000 other details that could go catastrophically wrong. "I'll need to speak with the venue coordinator immediately," Jessica said. "Do you have their contact information?" "Oh, there's no coordinator. It's family-owned. The owner handles everything himself. His name is Mark Riley. Here's his number." Of course there was no coordinator. Jessica scribbled down the number, already composing her to-do list. She would need to drive up there tomorrow, assess the situation, and somehow transform a rustic lodge into a wedding venue worthy of the Hall family name. "I'll handle everything," she told royalty. "The wedding will be perfect. I knew I could count on you. Oh, and Jessica, pack warm clothes. I have a feeling you're going to love it up there." After ending the call, Jessica stared at her phone screen. 8 days to plan a mountain wedding in December. She'd handled bigger challenges, but never ones involving potentially unreliable wilderness accommodations. "Everly, cancel my appointments for the rest of the week," she said. "We're going to Pine Valley." Everly's eyes widened. "Pine Valley? But that's in the middle of nowhere." "Exactly." Jessica was already mentally packing her emergency wedding kit, backup generators, portable heaters, and enough coffee to fuel a small army. "Book us rooms at whatever hotel is nearest to the Lakeside Lodge, and rent us an SUV with all-wheel drive. If we're doing this, we're doing it right." The next morning, Jessica found herself navigating winding mountain roads in a rented Range Rover, with Everly white-knuckling the passenger seat. Snow had begun falling an hour into their drive, transforming the landscape into a winter wonderland that would have been enchanting if Jessica weren't mentally cataloging all the ways it could interfere with wedding logistics. "The GPS says we're almost there," Everly said, peering through the windshield at the snow-dusted pine trees. "Though I lost cell service about 20 minutes ago." "Of course we did." Jessica navigated another curve, her hands tight on the steering wheel. She was dressed for efficiency rather than rustic charm. Designer jeans, practical boots, and a wool coat that had cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her hair was still perfectly styled, though she suspected that wouldn't last long in the mountain air. The road curved around a bend, and suddenly the Lakeside Lodge appeared before them, like something from a Christmas movie. The main building was an impressive log structure, with stone chimneys sending wisps of smoke into the gray sky. The lake stretched beyond it, its surface dark and mirror-smooth, reflecting the snow-laden pines that surrounded it. Smaller cabins dotted the property, each one twinkling with warm golden light from their windows. Despite herself, Jessica felt a small flutter of appreciation. It was beautiful, impractical, isolated, and completely unsuitable for a sophisticated wedding, but beautiful nonetheless. She parked near the main lodge and stepped out into the crisp mountain air. The silence was startling after years of city noise, just the whisper of falling snow and the distant call of winter birds. The scent of wood smoke and pine filled her lungs, and for just a moment, she felt an unexpected sense of peace. Then she remembered she had 8 days to plan a perfect wedding in the wilderness, and the peace evaporated. "Come on," she told Everly, grabbing her portfolio and purse. "Let's meet this Mark Riley and see what we're working with." They made their way carefully up the stone steps to the lodge's front entrance, Jessica's heels clicking against the snow-dusted stone. Before they could knock, the heavy wooden door swung open, and Jessica found herself face to face with quite possibly the most infuriatingly attractive man she'd ever encountered. Mark Riley was nothing like the grizzled mountain man she'd been expecting. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with tousled dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it, and warm brown eyes that seemed genuinely amused by something. He wore faded jeans, worn work boots, and a green flannel shirt that had clearly seen better days. A thick, cable-knit sweater hung open over the flannel, and somehow the entire ensemble looked effortlessly perfect on him. "You must be Jessica Thorne," he said, his voice carrying a slight gravelly quality that suggested he'd spent time outdoors. "Welcome to the Lakeside Lodge, Mr. Riley." Jessica extended her hand in her most professional manner, noting the calluses on his palm when he shook it. "Thank you for accommodating Miss Hall's wedding on such short notice." "Mark," he corrected with an easy smile, "and it's no problem. Royalty and Marco are great kids. Come on in, let me show you around." He stepped aside to let them enter, and Jessica found herself in a spacious great room that managed to be both rustic and elegant. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a fire crackling merrily behind a wrought iron screen. Comfortable leather sofas and armchairs were arranged in conversational groupings, and the walls were lined with bookshelves and vintage snowshoes. Large windows looked out over the lake, and the whole space had a warm, welcoming atmosphere that was the complete opposite of Jessica's usual sterile event venues. "It's lovely," Everly murmured, clearly charmed. Jessica was making mental notes. The space could work for a reception, assuming they could address the heating issues, improve the lighting, and completely reorganize the furniture layout. "So," Mark said, rubbing his hands together, "what can I tell you about the lodge? We've got 12 guest cabins, the main lodge here, and about 50 acres of property. The lake's perfect for photos, and if we get enough snow, I can break out the sleigh for romantic rides." "Let's start with the basics," Jessica said, pulling out her tablet. "Kitchen facilities, electrical capacity, heating systems, backup generators, Wi-Fi coverage, and parking arrangements." Mark's easy smile faltered slightly. Right. Well, we've got a fully equipped kitchen that can handle catering, though our usual approach is more family style than formal dining. The electrical system is solid. We upgraded it 5 years ago. Heating is primarily wood-burning fireplaces and radiant floor heating in the newer cabins. We've got a backup generator for emergencies, though we rarely need it. Wi-Fi is selective. It works great in the main lodge, spotty in the cabins, and parking shouldn't be a problem unless we get a really heavy snowfall. Jessica's fingers flew over her tablet as she made notes. Family-style catering meant they'd need to bring in outside help. Selective Wi-Fi was unacceptable. Wood-burning fireplaces were charming, but completely unreliable for maintaining proper temperatures during a formal event. "I'll need to see everything," she said. "The kitchen, the guest cabins, the ceremony site, and a full inventory of what you have available for events." "Of course." Mark gestured toward a hallway, "though I should mention, we're not really a wedding venue. We're more of a family retreat. Most of our guests come here to disconnect, relax, enjoy the outdoors. The wedding thing is new for us." Jessica felt her carefully maintained composure crack slightly. "You've never hosted a wedding before?" "Well, not a formal one. My cousin got married here a few years back, but that was more of a backyard barbecue situation. Royalty mentioned this would be more upscale." "More upscale." Jessica closed her eyes briefly, imagining the Hall family's reaction to a backyard barbecue wedding. "Mr. Riley, Mark, I think there might be some confusion about expectations here." "Probably," he agreed cheerfully. "But hey, how hard can it be, right? People have been getting married for thousands of years. Pretty sure we can figure it out." His casual attitude toward what Jessica considered one of the most important days in a couple's life made her teeth clench. This wasn't just any wedding. This was the Hall wedding. Media attention, social media coverage, influential guests who would judge every detail. And Mark Riley thought they could just figure it out. "Let me be very clear about something," Jessica said, her voice taking on the crisp, professional tone that had reduced grown men to tears in the corporate world. "This isn't a casual family gathering. This is a sophisticated celebration for some very important people. Everything must be perfect. Every detail must be flawless. There is no room for improvisation or figuring it out." Mark studied her for a moment, and she had the unsettling feeling he was seeing more than she intended to show. "And you're the person who makes sure that happens?" "I am. Must be a lot of pressure." Something in his voice, not mockery but genuine concern, made Jessica's defensive walls slam into place. "I'm very good at what I do." "I'm sure you are." He smiled again, that easy, genuine expression that seemed completely unaffected by her obvious stress. "Lucky for us, right? Come on, let me show you the kitchen. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised." He led them down the hallway, and Jessica found herself studying his relaxed gait, the way he moved through his space with complete confidence. Everything about him suggested a man who was comfortable with himself and his surroundings, the complete opposite of her carefully controlled existence. The kitchen was, she had to admit, impressive. Commercial-grade appliances, plenty of counter space, and a layout that would work well for catering staff. Through the windows, she could see the lake and the spot where royalty wanted to hold the ceremony. "This is where the magic happens," Mark said, patting the massive wooden island in the center of the room. "Our cook, Fernanda Brooks, makes the best Christmas cookies this side of the Continental Divide." She's already excited about the wedding cake. "About that," Jessica said. "The wedding cake will be provided by Marchetti's Patisserie in the city. They'll deliver it Christmas Eve morning." Mark raised an eyebrow. "You're bringing a cake from the city? That's a 4-hour drive in good weather. Marchetti's is the best. The Hall family expects the best. What if there's a snowstorm? What if the roads are impassable?" Jessica's tablet nearly slipped from her fingers. She hadn't considered that possibility. In the city, backup plans involved alternate caterers or venue changes, not weather-related road closures that could strand wedding cakes. "There won't be a snowstorm," she said firmly. Mark's lips twitched as if he were trying not to smile. "Ma'am, this is December in the mountains. There's always the possibility of a snowstorm. Then we'll have a backup plan." "Good thinking. Fernanda makes a mean wedding cake too. Just saying." Jessica made a note to research local bakeries, even though the thought of substituting a mountain baker for Marchetti's made her stomach clench. She was starting to realize that her usual meticulous planning might not be sufficient for the variables that came with mountain weather. "Let's see the ceremony site," she said. They walked back through the great room and out onto a wide deck that overlooked the lake. Even with snow beginning to fall more heavily, Jessica could see the appeal. The lake stretched out like a mirror, surrounded by snow-dusted pines. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks disappearing into low-hanging clouds. It was undeniably romantic. It was also completely exposed to the elements. "What if it's snowing during the ceremony?" she asked. "Then it'll be beautiful," Mark said simply. "Snow makes everything more magical." "What if it's sleeting? What if there's a blizzard? What if the temperature drops below 0? Then we move inside," Mark replied with the same casual confidence. "The great room can handle 50 people easy. We'll push back the furniture, set up chairs, and boom, indoor ceremony." Jessica stared at him. Boom is not a wedding plan. Boom is what happens when careful planning meets unpredictable circumstances and everything falls apart. Or, Mark said, his brown eyes warm with something that might have been amusement, boom is what happens when you stop trying to control everything and let life surprise you. The snow was falling harder now, and Jessica realized that her perfect hair was probably getting ruined. Her cheeks were cold, her toes were numb in her impractical boots, and she was standing on a deck in the wilderness discussing wedding logistics with a man who clearly had no idea what he was dealing with. "I need to see the guest cabins," she said. "All of them. Sure thing. Fair warning, though, they're rustic. No room service, no turn-down service, no concierge, just comfortable beds, working fireplaces, and great views." Jessica was beginning to understand that when Mark said rustic, he meant it. As they tramped through the snow to visit each cabin, she mentally added rustic to her growing list of problems to solve. The cabins were undeniably charming, with their log walls and stone fireplaces, but they were also small, simply furnished, and designed for people who wanted to rough it rather than guests accustomed to 5-star accommodations. "This is the largest cabin," Mark said, opening the door to a 2-bedroom unit with a small living area and kitchenette. "I figured the bride and groom could stay here." Jessica stepped inside, noting the handmade quilts on the beds, the vintage pine furniture, and the complete absence of modern amenities like a coffee machine or adequate lighting for getting ready. The bathroom had a clawfoot tub and pedestal sink. Charming, but completely impractical for bridal preparations. "Where exactly did you envision the bride getting ready?" she asked. "I don't know. Here, I guess. Or in the main lodge if she needs more space." Jessica closed her eyes. Getting ready was one of the most important parts of the wedding day. Photos of the bride in her preparation space would be treasured forever. And Mark was suggesting she get ready in a rustic cabin with inadequate lighting and no proper vanity area. "We'll need to set up a proper bridal suite," she said. "Professional lighting, proper mirrors, space for the photographer, and climate control." "Sure," Mark agreed easily. "Whatever you need." His willingness to accommodate her requests should have been reassuring, but instead it worried her. He was agreeing to things without understanding the complexity or cost involved. In her experience, that led to disappointment and last-minute disasters. By the time they finished touring all 12 cabins, Jessica's feet were soaked, her hair was definitely ruined, and her mental list of problems had grown exponentially. She needed to warm up, regroup, and start making phone calls to her network of vendors who might be willing to travel to the middle of nowhere for premium prices. "Let's head back to the lodge," Mark suggested. "Fernanda probably has hot chocolate ready, and we can sit by the fire while you tell me everything I'm doing wrong." Despite her frustration, Jessica found herself almost smiling. "Everything you're doing wrong would take more time than we have. Good thing we've got 8 days then." 8 days. Jessica's stomach clenched again. 8 days to transform a rustic retreat into a wedding venue worthy of the Hall family. 8 days to coordinate vendors, transportation, backup plans, and contingencies she hadn't even thought of yet. 8 days to work with a man who thought boom was an acceptable wedding plan. As they walked back to the lodge, snow crunching under their feet, Jessica realized she was facing the biggest challenge of her career. And for the first time in years, she wasn't entirely sure she could pull it off. The warmth of the lodge's great room was a blessed relief after the tour through the snow. Jessica's wet feet were screaming in her designer boots, and she could feel her carefully styled hair beginning to curl in the humidity. Everly had claimed a spot near the fire and was already looking more relaxed than Jessica had seen her in months. "Hot chocolate?" Mark appeared with 2 steaming mugs topped with what looked like homemade whipped cream. "Fernanda's special recipe. She uses real Belgian chocolate and a secret ingredient she won't tell anyone." Jessica accepted the mug gratefully, wrapping her cold fingers around the ceramic. The first sip was a revelation, rich, creamy, and warming her from the inside out. It was possibly the best hot chocolate she'd ever tasted, though she wasn't about to admit that to Mark. "Thank you," she said instead. "This is very good. Fernanda will be thrilled to hear that. She's a little nervous about impressing city folk." Jessica pulled out her tablet and settled into one of the leather armchairs. "I need to make some phone calls and start organizing vendors. Is there a quiet space where I can work?" "Sure. You can use my office. Though you might want to warm up first. You look like you're about to freeze to death." She was cold, but she was also running out of time. "I need to get started immediately. The weather forecast is calling for more snow tonight, which could affect delivery schedules." Mark studied her for a moment, and again she had that unsettling feeling that he was seeing too much. "When's the last time you took a break?" "I don't need a break. I need to plan a wedding." "Everyone needs breaks, even wedding planners. Not 8 days before a major event." Jessica's fingers were already flying over her tablet screen, pulling up her vendor contacts. "I need to call the florist, the rental company, the photographer, the musicians." "Or," Mark said, settling into the chair across from her, "you could take 20 minutes to drink your hot chocolate, dry off, and maybe tell me what kind of wedding royalty and Marco actually want." Jessica looked up from her tablet, ready to explain that she didn't have 20 minutes to spare, but something in Mark's expression stopped her. He wasn't challenging her or trying to waste her time. He looked genuinely interested in understanding the situation. "Fine," she said, 20 minutes. But then I really do need to start making calls." "Deal." Mark leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. "So what's the story with our bride and groom?" Jessica realized she'd been so focused on logistics that she hadn't really talked about Royalty and Marco as people. Royalty Hall is the daughter of tech mogul Richard Hall. She's 26, graduated from Stanford, and currently works for her father's company in business development. Marco Chavez is a wildlife photographer. They met when she hired him for a corporate retreat photo shoot in Yosemite. Sounds romantic. She's very enthusiastic about everything. The wedding, the lodge, the idea of a Christmas Eve ceremony. Marco seems more laid back, but he's clearly devoted to her. And they want a mountain wedding because... Jessica sipped her hot chocolate, thinking, I think royalty wants something authentic, different from the usual society weddings. She grew up attending very formal, very traditional events. This feels more personal to her. That makes sense. The lodge tends to bring out people's more authentic sides. There was something in the way he said it that made Jessica look at him more closely. Is that why you're here? Looking for authenticity? Mark's easy smile faltered slightly. Something like that. Before Jessica could ask what that meant, Everly appeared with her own mug of hot chocolate and a slightly dazed expression. I just met Fernanda, and she's amazing. She's been cooking here for 15 years, and she knows everything about mountain wedding traditions. Did you know there's a local custom of hiding Christmas ornaments in the wedding flowers for good luck? No, Jessica said firmly. We are not hiding Christmas ornaments in the bridal bouquet. The florist has very specific instructions for white roses and winter greenery. But it's charming, Everly protested, and Fernanda says it's supposed to ensure a happy marriage. The Hall family expects elegant, sophisticated florals, not folk traditions. Mark cleared his throat. What if we compromised? Traditional bouquet for the ceremony, but maybe incorporate some local touches in the reception centerpieces? Jessica was about to explain that she didn't compromise on client specifications when she realized Mark was trying to help. He was offering a solution that might satisfy both the family's expectations and the lodge's authentic atmosphere. I'll consider it, she said finally. Depending on what the local traditions actually involve, Fernanda can tell you all about them, Everly said eagerly. She's also offered to make welcome baskets for all the guest cabins with homemade cookies and hot chocolate mix. That actually wasn't a bad idea. Jessica made a note on her tablet. What would she charge for that? Charge? Mark looked surprised. She wouldn't charge anything. She's just excited about the wedding. Jessica stared at him. Everyone charges for wedding services. Everyone. Not Fernanda. She loves this stuff. Making people feel welcome, celebrating special occasions. It's not about money for her. The concept of someone providing wedding services without charging premium prices was so foreign to Jessica that she wasn't sure how to respond. In her world, everything had a price, and the more exclusive the event, the higher that price became. That's very generous, she said carefully. That's just how things work here. People help each other out. Community matters. Jessica had heard about places where community mattered, but she'd never actually experienced it. Her life was built around professional relationships, service providers, and transactions. The idea of someone helping with a wedding just because they wanted to celebrate with the couple was nice. Impractical, but nice. Speaking of community, Mark continued, you should know that word about the wedding has already gotten around. People are excited. Mrs. Wright, she owns the antique shop in town, has offered to loan her collection of vintage Christmas ornaments for decorating. And Halo Wilson, who runs the tree farm, says he'll provide the perfect Christmas tree for the lodge, no charge. People you don't even know are offering to help with the wedding? Royalty and Marco made quite an impression when they visited, and Pine Valley doesn't get many fancy events. Everyone wants to pitch in. Jessica was torn between appreciation for the generous offers and panic about losing control of the wedding details. That's wonderful, but I'll need to coordinate everything. Make sure it all fits with the overall vision. Of course. I'm just saying, you're not in this alone. If you need help, there are plenty of people who'd be happy to pitch in. The warmth in his voice made something inside Jessica's chest flutter strangely. She was used to handling everything herself, managing every detail through sheer force of will and careful planning. The idea of accepting help felt foreign and slightly dangerous. I should make those phone calls now, she said, standing up. Right. My office is just down the hall. Fair warning, the Wi-Fi can be a little spotty when the weather's bad. Jessica's peaceful moment evaporated. Spotty Wi-Fi is not acceptable. I need reliable internet access. We've got a landline in the office that works fine. and the Wi-Fi usually comes back once the snow stops. Usually. Jessica added reliable internet access to her growing list of problems to solve. She couldn't coordinate vendors, confirm deliveries, or handle last-minute changes without solid communication. Mark led her to his office, which turned out to be a comfortable room with a rustic wooden desk, built-in bookshelves, and large windows overlooking the lake. A stone fireplace took up one corner, and the walls were decorated with what looked like vintage ski equipment and framed photographs of outdoor adventures. "Make yourself at home," Mark said. "I'll be around if you need anything." Jessica settled behind the desk and immediately tried to connect to the Wi-Fi. Her laptop showed 1 bar of signal, then none, then 1 bar again. She took a deep breath and picked up the landline, dialing her florist in the city. "Enchanted Gardens, this is Patricia speaking. Patricia, it's Jessica Thorne. I have an urgent request for the hall wedding. We need to discuss delivery logistics for a remote mountain location." "Remote mountain location?" "Jessica, you said the wedding was at an upscale venue. Plans changed. I need you to deliver to the Lakeside Lodge in Pine Valley. It's about 4 hours from the city." There was a long pause. 4 hours? On Christmas Eve? In potentially bad weather? "I'll pay the premium delivery fee. Whatever it takes." "It's not about the money, Jessica. It's about logistics. If there's a storm, we can't guarantee delivery, and the flowers might not survive the trip in cold temperatures." Jessica felt her carefully controlled world tilting slightly. In the city, problems had solutions. Money could solve transportation issues, backup venues were always available, and weather was rarely a factor in event planning. "What are my options?" she asked. "Local florist, someone who knows the area, understands mountain weather, and can source flowers that won't wilt in the cold." "Is there a local florist in Pine Valley who can handle wedding flowers for 50 people? "I have no idea. You'll have to research that." After ending the call, Jessica stared at her laptop screen. Her first vendor conversation had not gone according to plan. She tried her rental company next, only to get the same response: concern about remote delivery, weather-related complications, and suggestions to find local suppliers. By the time she'd made 6 phone calls, Jessica was facing the reality that her usual vendor network might not be able to handle a mountain wedding. She was going to have to find local suppliers, which meant trusting people she'd never worked with to handle one of the most important events of her career. A soft knock on the office door interrupted her growing panic. "Come in." Mark appeared with a fresh mug of hot chocolate and what looked like homemade cookies. "Thought you might need some fuel. How are the calls going?" "Terribly," Jessica admitted before she could stop herself. "Everyone's concerned about weather and distance. Half my usual vendors can't guarantee delivery." "That's tough." Mark set the mug and cookies on the desk. "But, there are some really good suppliers around here. People who understand mountain logistics. Do you know a florist who can handle wedding flowers?" "Fiona Wright, the one I mentioned who owns the antique shop. She used to be a florist before she moved here. Still does arrangements for special occasions. And she grows a lot of her own flowers. Even has a greenhouse for winter blooms." Jessica felt a flicker of hope. "Is she good?" "She's amazing. Did the flowers for my cousin's wedding, actually. Very talented, and she really cares about making things beautiful. Would she be willing to take on a wedding this size on such short notice? Only one way to find out. Want me to call her?" Jessica hesitated. In her world, she maintained professional relationships with carefully vetted vendors. The idea of hiring someone based on Mark's recommendation, sight unseen, went against every principle of event planning she'd ever learned. But she also didn't have many other options. "Yes," she said finally. "Please call her." Mark pulled out his phone, and Jessica was surprised to see it was an older model without any of the smartphone features she considered essential. He dialed a number from memory. "Hey, Fiona, it's Mark." "Good, thanks. Listen, I've got a wedding planner here who needs a florist for that Christmas Eve wedding at the lodge." "Yeah, that's the one. She's here now if you want to talk to her." He handed Jessica the phone, and she found herself speaking directly to Fiona Wright, who turned out to have a warm, enthusiastic voice and immediate ideas about winter wedding flowers. "I grow winter roses in my greenhouse," Fiona said. and I know exactly where to get the best pine boughs and holly. When can you come see some samples? As soon as possible, Jessica replied. Are you available this afternoon? Of course. This is so exciting. We don't get many weddings here, especially fancy ones. After arranging to meet Fiona in an hour, Jessica hung up feeling slightly more optimistic. She looked up to find Mark watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Feel better? He asked, marginally. I still need to find a rental company, musicians, transportation, and about a dozen other vendors. I might be able to help with some of those. My friend Yusuf Robinson runs a sound system rental business, and he's got connections with local musicians. And for transportation, well, that depends on what you need. Luxury transportation for the wedding party, something elegant and weather appropriate. Mark was quiet for a moment. Define elegant. Town cars. Maybe a limousine for the bride. In the mountains? In December? That's not going to work. The roads up here aren't designed for low-clearance vehicles, especially in snow. Jessica felt her stress levels rising again. Then what do you suggest? SUVs. Maybe a nice van for group transportation. Or, Mark's eyes lit up with an idea that Jessica immediately distrusted. If we get enough snow, I could break out the horse-drawn sleigh. Now that's elegant and appropriate for the setting. A sleigh? For the bride? Why not? It's romantic, it's Christmas-themed, and it would make incredible photos. Despite herself, Jessica found herself considering the idea. Royalty had said she wanted something authentic and magical. A horse-drawn sleigh certainly qualified as both. Do you actually have a sleigh? She asked. My grandfather's. Restored it myself a few years ago. The horses belong to Halo Wilson, but he's always happy to help out with special occasions. And you know how to drive a sleigh? Mark's grin was slightly wicked. Lady, I can drive anything with wheels, runners, or hooves. Something about the way he said it made Jessica's cheeks warm. She looked down at her tablet, making notes about sleigh transportation, while trying to ignore the way Mark's confidence affected her. I'll mention it to the bride, she said, but we'll need backup transportation in case the weather doesn't cooperate. Absolutely, I can arrange SUVs as backup. Jessica made more notes, realizing that this conversation had been more productive than any of her phone calls. Mark knew the local resources, understood the logistical challenges, and seemed genuinely committed to making the wedding successful. Why are you being so helpful? She asked suddenly. Mark looked surprised by the question. Because I want the wedding to be great. Royalty and Marco seem like good people, and they chose my lodge for their special day. That means something to me. But you don't really know them. I don't have to know them well to want them to be happy. That's just how things should work. Jessica stared at him, trying to understand his perspective. In her experience, people helped others because they were paid to, or because they expected something in return. The idea of helping strangers simply because it was the right thing to do was so foreign to her that she didn't know how to respond. That's very nice of you, she said finally. It's not nice, Mark replied. It's just normal, at least around here. Normal. Jessica was beginning to realize that her definition of normal might be very different from Mark's. And somehow, his version was starting to appeal to her in ways that made her deeply uncomfortable. The next morning, Jessica woke up in her room at Pine Valley Inn, the only hotel within 30 miles of the lodge, feeling more rested than she had in months. The mountain air and unusual quiet had apparently worked magic on her chronically tense body. Then she remembered she had 6 days to plan a perfect wedding, and the tension came flooding back. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Royalty, 2 from the mother of the bride, and 17 text messages from various vendors with questions, concerns, and requests for clarification. Jessica sighed and reached for her laptop, ready to tackle another day of mountain wedding logistics. An hour later, she and Everly were driving back to the lodge through a landscape that looked like it had been dusted with powdered sugar overnight. The new snow made everything look even more pristine and Christmas card perfect. But it also reminded Jessica of all the weather-related variables that could destroy her carefully laid plans. Look at that. Everly pointed to the lodge's main building, which now sported evergreen garlands around the wraparound porch and red ribbons tied to the porch railings. It looks like something from a movie. Jessica had to admit it was beautiful. Someone had been busy early this morning, and the decorations perfectly complemented the lodge's rustic architecture. As they pulled into the parking area, she could see Mark on the roof of one of the guest cabins, hanging Christmas lights along the eaves. "Careful up there," she called out, surprising herself with her concern for his safety. Mark looked down and waved. "Almost done. What do you think?" The cabin now twinkled with warm white lights that would create a magical glow once the sun set. Combined with the snow-covered roof and the evergreen wreath on the front door, it looked like something from a Christmas village. "It looks wonderful," Jessica admitted. "But please be careful. The last thing this wedding needs is an injured lodge owner." Mark's laugh carried across the crisp morning air. "Yes, ma'am. I'll be down in a minute." Jessica found herself watching him work, noting the easy confidence with which he moved across the slippery roof. Everything about him suggested competence and self-reliance, qualities she found unexpectedly attractive. "Earth to Jessica," Everly said with amusement. "You're staring." "I'm not staring, I'm supervising." Jessica pulled her gaze away from Mark and headed toward the lodge. "We have a meeting with the florist in an hour, and I want to check on the kitchen setup first." Inside the lodge, they found Fernanda Brooks pulling a batch of something that smelled like cinnamon and vanilla from one of the ovens. The lodge's cook was a woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and flour-dusted apron tied around her ample waist. Her smile was warm and genuine as she greeted them. "Good morning." "Perfect timing. I just finished the sample cookies for your welcome baskets." "Sample cookies?" Jessica asked. "For you to approve, I made 3 different kinds: traditional sugar cookies with royal icing, gingerbread people, and my special Christmas spice cookies. I wanted to make sure they're fancy enough for your wedding guests." Fernanda had arranged the cookies on a beautiful wooden platter, and each one was a small work of art. The sugar cookies were decorated with intricate snowflake patterns. The gingerbread people wore tiny icing scarves and mittens, and the Christmas spice cookies had been dusted with sparkling sugar that caught the light. "These are beautiful," Jessica said, genuinely impressed. "And they smell incredible." "Try one," Fernanda encouraged. "I need to know if they're good enough for city people." Jessica bit into a Christmas spice cookie and nearly groaned with pleasure. It was perfectly spiced, with a tender crumb and a subtle sweetness that wasn't overwhelming. "This is amazing." "What's in it?" "Family recipe," Fernanda said with obvious pride. "My grandmother brought it from Mexico, but I've adapted it for American tastes. Cinnamon, nutmeg, cardamom, and a touch of chili powder." "Chili powder?" "Just a tiny bit. Gives it warmth without being spicy. Most people can't identify it, but they always say there's something special about the flavor." Jessica made notes on her tablet. "These would be perfect for the welcome baskets. Could you make enough for 50 baskets?" "Already planning on it. And I was thinking, what if we included some hot chocolate mix and maybe some locally made honey? There's a beekeeper about 10 miles from here who makes the most beautiful Christmas honey blend." "That sounds wonderful. What would you charge for putting together the baskets?" Fernanda looked confused. "Charge? I'm not charging anything. This is for the wedding." There it was again, that concept of people helping just because they wanted to celebrate. Jessica was beginning to understand that Pine Valley operated on different principles than the city, and those principles were surprisingly appealing. "At least let me cover the cost of supplies," Jessica insisted. "Well, if you insist, but I'm not making a profit on this. It's just fun for me." Mark appeared in the kitchen doorway, stamping snow off his boots. "Everything looks great out there. All the cabins have lights now, and Halo Wilson dropped off the Christmas tree for the main lodge." "Already?" Jessica looked around. "Where is it?" "In the great room. Want to see?" They followed Mark back to the main room, where Jessica stopped in her tracks. The Christmas tree was magnificent, at least 10 feet tall, perfectly shaped, and filling the space with the scent of fresh pine. It stood in the corner by the windows, positioned to catch both natural light and the glow from the fireplace. "It's perfect," she said softly. "Halo knows his trees," Mark agreed. "He wanted to make sure it was special for the wedding." "When did he deliver it?" "About an hour ago. He and I got it set up while you were getting ready at the inn." Jessica realized that while she'd been checking emails and making vendor calls, an entire Christmas transformation had been taking place at the lodge. The decorations, the tree, Fernanda's cookies. It was as if the whole place was coming alive with holiday spirit. "There's one more thing," Mark said, looking slightly hesitant. "Fiona Wright called this morning. She wants to show you some flower samples, but she suggested meeting at her greenhouse, rather than the antique shop. Says you'll get a better sense of what she can do for the wedding." "That's fine. Where's her greenhouse?" "It's on her property, about 15 minutes from here. But the road can be a little tricky if you're not used to mountain driving." Jessica glanced at her rental SUV, remembering yesterday's nerve-wracking drive up the mountain roads. "Would you be willing to drive us there?" "Of course. I was hoping you'd ask. I want to make sure Fiona understands exactly what you need." An hour later, Jessica found herself in the passenger seat of Mark's pickup truck, winding through mountain roads that were even more remote than the route to the lodge. The truck was old but well-maintained, with a classic country music station playing softly on the radio and a thermos of coffee secured in the cup holder. "Tell me about Fiona," Jessica said, trying to distract herself from the way Mark's hands looked on the steering wheel. "She moved here about 10 years ago from San Francisco. Used to run a high-end floral design business down there. But she got burned out on the city life. Bought a little house with some land, started growing her own flowers, and now she's the happiest person I know." "She gave up a successful business to move to the mountains?" "According to her, she didn't give up anything. She found what she was really looking for." Jessica tried to imagine abandoning her carefully built career to start over in a place like Pine Valley. The idea was both terrifying and strangely appealing. "What about you?" she asked. "Have you always lived here?" Mark was quiet for a moment. "No. I used to be a professional snowboarder. Traveled all over the world, competed in the Olympics, had sponsorship deals, the whole thing." Jessica turned to look at him, surprised. "Really? I didn't know that. It's not something I talk about much anymore. I retired early, bought the lodge from my uncle, and haven't looked back." "Why did you retire early?" Another pause, longer this time. "Got tired of the pressure. The constant travel, the competition, the whole lifestyle. I wanted something more real." Jessica understood the pressure part. Her life was nothing but pressure and deadlines and impossible expectations. But the idea of walking away from success to find something more real was foreign to her. "Do you miss it? The excitement, the travel, the recognition?" "Sometimes. But not enough to go back. This life suits me better." They turned down a narrow lane lined with snow-covered pine trees, and Jessica could see a charming farmhouse ahead with several outbuildings and what looked like a large greenhouse. Smoke was rising from the farmhouse chimney, and the whole property had a welcoming, lived-in feel. "This is it," Mark said, pulling into the driveway. Fiona's little piece of paradise. Before they could even get out of the truck, the farmhouse door opened and a woman appeared on the porch. Fiona Wright was in her 40s, with shoulder-length auburn hair and paint-stained jeans. She wore a thick sweater and snow boots, and her smile was warm enough to melt the snow on her front steps. "Mark, and you must be Jessica," she called out. "Come in. Come in. I've got coffee on, and I can't wait to show you what I've been working on." Inside the farmhouse, Jessica was charmed by the cozy, artistic atmosphere. The living room was filled with comfortable furniture, handmade pottery, and beautiful floral arrangements that showed Fiona's obvious talent. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and the whole space felt like a warm hug. "So, tell me about this wedding," Fiona said, settling them around her kitchen table with mugs of excellent coffee. "Mark mentioned it's Christmas Eve, outdoor ceremony, very elegant. What's your vision?" Jessica pulled out her tablet and showed Fiona the inspiration photos she'd collected. Classic winter elegance. White roses, silver accents, maybe some pine boughs for the Christmas element. Clean, sophisticated, timeless. Fiona studied the photos thoughtfully. "Beautiful. Very traditional. But can I show you something?" She led them through a mudroom and out to the greenhouse, which turned out to be a magical winter wonderland. The space was warm and humid, filled with the scent of growing things, and the sound of gently dripping water, but what took Jessica's breath away were the flowers. Roses bloomed in every shade of white and cream, from pure snow to warm ivory. There were also deep red roses that looked like velvet, and pink roses in shades from pale blush to rich magenta. Holly bushes heavy with berries lined one wall, while pine boughs and eucalyptus hung from the ceiling to dry. "This is incredible," Jessica said, walking among the growing beds. "I had no idea you could grow roses like this in winter." Greenhouse growing has its challenges, but it's possible with the right setup. And there's something magical about fresh flowers in the dead of winter. Fiona picked up a perfect white rose and handed it to Jessica. "Smell that." The rose smelled like summer and sunshine and everything beautiful about the world. Jessica closed her eyes and inhaled, feeling some of her constant tension ease away. "Now," Fiona said, "I love your classic white vision, and I can absolutely do that. But what if we added just a touch of Christmas magic?" She began gathering flowers as she talked. White roses, silver eucalyptus, deep green pine boughs. But then she added sprigs of holly with bright red berries and some pine cones that had been lightly dusted with silver. "What about incorporating some red elements?" Fiona suggested. "Not overwhelming, just touches. Red berries, red ribbon, maybe some red roses in the reception centerpieces." Jessica was about to say no automatically. The client had specified white and silver. But something made her pause. The arrangement Fiona was creating was still elegant and sophisticated, but it also looked more joyful, more celebratory. "It's beautiful," she admitted. "I'd need to check with the bride." "Of course, I'm just saying, Christmas weddings have an opportunity to be warmer than other winter events. You can embrace the holiday joy instead of fighting against it." Mark, who had been quietly watching the consultation, spoke up. "What does your gut tell you the bride really wants?" Jessica thought about royalty, her enthusiasm for the lodge, her excitement about the Christmas Eve timing, her desire for something authentic and different from typical society weddings. "She wants magic," Jessica said slowly. "She wants her wedding to feel special and joyful and magical." "Then let's give her magic," Fiona said with a grin. "Classic elegance with touches of Christmas joy. The best of both worlds." They spent the next hour discussing logistics, quantities, and backup plans. Fiona had solutions for every concern Jessica raised. Alternative flowers if the roses didn't bloom properly, indoor arrangements if the outdoor ceremony had to be moved, and a willingness to work around any last-minute changes. "One more thing," Fiona said as they prepared to leave. "I know you're planning to use a bakery from the city for the wedding cake, but what if they can't deliver because of weather?" Jessica's stomach clenched. "Do you know any local bakers? I know Fernanda Brooks makes an amazing wedding cake, but there's also someone else you should meet." Fiona smiled mysteriously. "Someone who might surprise you." On the drive back to the lodge, Jessica found herself feeling more optimistic about the wedding logistics. Fiona clearly knew what she was doing, understood both elegance and practicality, and seemed genuinely excited about the project. "She's wonderful," Jessica told Mark. "I can see why you recommended her. Fiona's special. She has this way of making everything more beautiful. Like you do with the lodge?" Mark glanced at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" "The Christmas decorations, the way you've set everything up. It's not just functional, it's beautiful. You've created something magical. I just want people to be happy here." There was something in his voice that made Jessica study his profile as he drove. "Is that what you were looking for when you left snowboarding? A way to make people happy? Maybe. I spent so many years focused on winning, on being the best, on beating everyone else. It gets exhausting after a while. Making people happy is better." Jessica understood the exhaustion part. Her entire career was built on competition, being the best event planner, landing the biggest clients, exceeding impossible expectations. She'd never really thought about what would make her happy beyond success and recognition. "Do you think you'll stay here permanently?" she asked. "Can't imagine being anywhere else now." "What about you? Do you ever think about slowing down?" "I can't slow down. My clients depend on me to deliver perfection." "But what do you depend on?" The question caught Jessica off guard. She'd built her life around being indispensable to others, but she'd never really considered what she needed for herself. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe that's something worth figuring out." As they pulled into the lodge's parking area, Jessica found herself looking at the place with new eyes. The Christmas lights twinkling on the cabins, the smoke rising from the chimneys, the way the snow-covered mountains surrounded the property like protective arms. It all looked like a refuge from the demanding world she usually inhabited. "Thank you," she said as they got out of the truck. "For driving us, for helping with the vendors, for everything. It's my pleasure, really." Mark's smile was warm and genuine, and for a moment Jessica felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the sense that someone was taking care of her instead of the other way around. It was unsettling and wonderful at the same time. That evening, after a productive day of vendor calls and planning sessions, Jessica found herself back in the lodge's great room, with a mug of Fernanda's hot chocolate and her laptop. The fire was crackling, Christmas music was playing softly in the background, and snow was falling gently outside the windows. For the first time in months, she wasn't frantically checking her phone or worrying about tomorrow's schedule. She was just sitting by a fire, watching the snow, and feeling unexpectedly peaceful. "Mind if I join you?" Mark appeared with his own mug and settled into the chair across from her. "Of course not. I was just catching up on emails. Find anything exciting in your inbox?" "Not really. The usual crisis management and client requests." Jessica closed her laptop and looked at him. "Can I ask you something? When you were snowboarding professionally, did you ever have moments where you felt like you were living someone else's life?" Mark considered the question. "All the time. Especially toward the end. I'd be standing at the top of some mountain, about to compete in front of thousands of people, and I'd think, how did I get here? Is this really what I want? What did you do about it?" Eventually, I stopped ignoring the feeling and started listening to it. Turned out, my gut was trying to tell me something important. Jessica thought about her own gut feelings, the constant anxiety, the sense that she was always running but never arriving anywhere meaningful, the way her chest sometimes tightened when she thought about her future. "What if your gut is telling you something you're not ready to hear?" she asked. "Then maybe the question is whether you're ready to get ready." Outside, the snow continued to fall, transforming the already magical landscape into something even more beautiful. Jessica watched the flakes drift past the windows and realized that for the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about work or deadlines or client expectations. She was thinking about what it might feel like to build a life that made her as content as Mark seemed in his mountain retreat. The morning of December 21st brought two significant developments: 3 inches of fresh snow and a phone call from Royalty Hall that nearly sent Jessica into a panic spiral. "I know this sounds crazy," Royalty said, her voice bubbling with excitement, "but Marco and I were wondering if we could come up to the lodge today, just for the afternoon. We want to see how everything's coming together, and honestly, we're both getting a little overwhelmed with all the family craziness down here." Jessica gripped her phone tighter. "Today? But we're still in the middle of setup. Nothing's ready for viewing." "That's perfect. We don't want to see it all polished and finished. We want to be part of the process. Please, Jessica? We promise not to get in the way." Against her better judgment, Jessica found herself agreeing. 2 hours later, she was standing in the lodge's great room with Mark, frantically trying to make the space look more organized than it actually was. "Relax," Mark said, watching her rearrange the same stack of linens for the 3rd time. "They're going to love it. You don't understand. If they see the venue in this state, they might lose confidence in the whole plan. Or they might get excited about being part of creating something special." Before Jessica could respond, the sound of tires on snow announced the arrival of a silver SUV. Through the windows, she could see a young woman with long, dark hair practically bouncing in the passenger seat. "That's got to be Royalty," Mark said with amusement. The couple who entered the lodge were exactly what Jessica had expected, and nothing like she'd imagined. Royalty Hall was indeed enthusiastic, tall and elegant with sparkling eyes and an infectious smile. But there was also a warmth and genuineness about her that immediately put Jessica at ease. Marco Chavez was quieter, with serious dark eyes and gentle hands that never stopped touching his fiancée in small, affectionate ways. "This is even more beautiful than I remembered," Royalty exclaimed, spinning around to take in the decorated great room. "Oh, Marco, look at the tree." The Christmas tree now sported strings of warm white lights and a collection of handmade ornaments that Fiona Wright had contributed from her antique shop. It was rustic and elegant at the same time, perfectly suited to the lodge's atmosphere. "Jessica, this is incredible," Marco said, his voice carrying a slight accent that suggested Spanish was his first language. "The whole place feels like Christmas magic." "It's not finished yet," Jessica said quickly. "We're still working on the lighting design, and the ceremony setup won't be in place until tomorrow." "Stop," Royalty interrupted gently. "It's perfect. Exactly what we wanted." Jessica felt some of her tension ease. "Really?" "Really. We wanted authentic and magical, and this is both." Royalty moved to the windows overlooking the lake. "Is that where we'll have the ceremony?" "If the weather cooperates," Jessica replied. "We have an indoor backup plan if needed." "The weather will cooperate," Royalty said with complete confidence. "I can feel it." Mark stepped forward. "Would you like the full tour? See where you'll be staying, check out the ceremony site?" For the next hour, Jessica watched Royalty and Marco explore their wedding venue with the joy and excitement she wished all her clients possessed. They loved the rustic cabins, cooed over Fernanda's sample cookies, and spent 20 minutes throwing snowballs at each other by the lake like children. "They're wonderful," Jessica told Mark as they watched the couple build a snowman near the ceremony site. "They are. This is what weddings should feel like." "What do you mean?" "Joyful. Celebratory. About love instead of perfection." Jessica thought about the dozens of weddings she'd planned over the years. How many of those brides had been as genuinely happy as Royalty? How many had focused on the marriage instead of just the event? "Can I ask you something?" Royalty appeared at Jessica's elbow, slightly breathless from snowman construction. "What made you become a wedding planner?" The question caught Jessica off guard. I'm good at organizing events, managing details, making sure everything runs smoothly. But why weddings specifically? Jessica realized she'd never really thought about that. "I suppose because they're important. People only get married once, ideally. So everything has to be perfect." "That's very sweet," Royalty said thoughtfully. "But what about the love part? Do you love weddings? Did she love weddings?" Jessica tried to remember the last time she'd felt genuinely moved by a ceremony or excited about a celebration. Mostly, weddings felt like high-stakes performance events where failure wasn't an option. "I love creating beautiful experiences for couples," she said diplomatically. "That's not the same thing," Royalty observed. "Have you ever been married?" "No. I've been too focused on my career." "What about dating? Anyone special in your life?" Jessica glanced involuntarily at Mark, who was helping Marco add a scarf to their snowman. "No. No time for dating." Royalty followed her gaze and smiled knowingly. "Mark seems nice. He's very helpful with the wedding logistics." "I bet he is." Royalty's tone suggested she was talking about more than just wedding planning. "You know, some of the best things in life happen when we're not trying to control every detail." Before Jessica could respond to that observation, Marco called out, "Royalty, come help us with the snowman's arms." As Jessica watched Royalty run back to her fiancé, she found herself envying their easy affection and spontaneous joy. When was the last time she'd built a snowman? When was the last time she'd done anything just for fun? "Pretty great, aren't they?" Mark appeared beside her, snow dusting his dark hair. "They really are. I can see why you wanted to help with their wedding." "What about you? Are you starting to enjoy this project?" Jessica considered the question. Despite all her initial concerns about the venue and the logistics, she was enjoying this wedding more than any event she'd planned in years. "Yes, actually. It's different from my usual weddings." "Different how?" "More personal. More real, I guess." "Maybe that's because you're letting yourself be part of it instead of just managing it." Jessica was about to ask what he meant when her phone rang. The caller ID showed her assistant's name. "Excuse me," she told Mark. "I need to take this." "Jessica, thank God." Everly's voice was tight with stress. "We have a problem. A big problem. What kind of problem? The string quartet canceled. Their violinist is in the hospital with a broken wrist, and they can't find a replacement on such short notice. Jessica felt her blood pressure spike. Music was crucial for the ceremony and reception. A wedding without proper music was like a Broadway show without sound. What about the backup musicians I asked you to research? That's the other problem. The jazz trio already has a gig. The classical duo is in Hawaii for the holidays, and the solo pianist doesn't do outdoor events in winter. Jessica closed her eyes, trying to think. 3 days before the wedding, and they had no musicians. This was exactly the kind of crisis that could destroy an event's reputation. Keep calling, she told Everly. Try everyone on the list twice. Offer double the usual fee if necessary. Already did that. Jessica, I think we might be out of options. After ending the call, Jessica stood in the snow, feeling the weight of potential failure. Without music, the wedding would lose much of its magic and elegance. She'd have to tell royalty and Marco that one of the most important elements of their celebration wasn't going to happen. Bad news? Mark asked gently. The musicians canceled. My assistant can't find replacements. Jessica rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. I don't know what to tell the bride and groom. What kind of music were you planning? String quartet for the ceremony, something more contemporary for the reception? Classical, elegant, appropriate for the setting. Mark was quiet for a moment. What if I told you I might have a solution? What kind of solution? There's a local group that might be available. They're not exactly a string quartet, but they're really good. Jessica felt a flicker of hope. What kind of group? Folk musicians. Acoustic guitar, fiddle, mandolin. They specialize in Celtic and Americana music, but they know classical pieces too. Folk musicians. Jessica tried to imagine royalty's reaction to having fiddle music at her elegant mountain wedding. I don't know. That's very different from what we planned. Want me to call them? At least find out if they're available? Jessica looked across the snow to where royalty and Marco were laughing as they added finishing touches to their snowman. These were people who'd chosen a rustic lodge over a traditional ballroom, who wanted authentic mountain charm instead of predictable elegance. Yes, she said finally. Please call them. 20 minutes later, Jessica found herself listening to Mark's friend Yusuf Robinson explain his band's capabilities over the phone. We're called Pine Valley Music, Yusuf said. 4-piece acoustic group. We do a lot of wedding gigs, actually. Ceremony music, reception dancing, whatever people need. Our style is more folk than classical, but we can adapt. Could you play traditional wedding music? Canon in D, Ave Maria, that sort of thing? Absolutely. We do acoustic arrangements of classical pieces all the time. They're beautiful in an outdoor setting. What about reception music? Dancing? That's our specialty. We know everything from traditional folk dances to contemporary covers. People love dancing to live acoustic music. It's more intimate than a DJ. Jessica made quick notes, calculating logistics and backup plans. Would you be available on Christmas Eve? And would you be willing to learn any specific songs the couple requests? Christmas Eve is actually perfect for us. Most of our regular gigs are earlier in December. And we love learning new songs. Give us 3 days and we can play anything you want. After ending the call, Jessica felt cautiously optimistic. Folk musicians weren't what she'd originally planned, but they might actually be better suited to the lodge's atmosphere than a traditional string quartet. So? Mark asked. They sound promising, but I need to run it by the bride and groom first. They found Royalty and Marco warming up by the fire in the great room, both of them glowing from their outdoor activities and looking completely content. I hate to interrupt, Jessica said, but I need to discuss a change in the music plans. She explained the situation with the string quartet and Yusuf's band, expecting disappointment or concern. Instead, Royalty's eyes lit up with excitement. Folk musicians? That sounds perfect. More authentic than a string quartet, and probably more fun for dancing. Are you sure? Jessica asked. I know you wanted classical elegance. I wanted magic, Royalty corrected, and live acoustic music in a mountain lodge sounds absolutely magical. Marco nodded agreement. I'd much rather dance to folk music than a DJ. It feels more personal. Jessica made the booking on the spot, feeling relieved and slightly amazed that another potential disaster had turned into an improvement. This wedding was teaching her that sometimes the unexpected changes were better than the original plans. "You know what?" Royalty said suddenly. "Since we're here, and since you're being so flexible with all these changes, could we help with something? I know you probably have everything under control, but it would mean a lot to us to be part of setting up our own wedding." Jessica's first instinct was to politely decline. Brides and grooms helping with setup was against every principle of professional event planning. But looking at Royalty's eager face, she found herself nodding. "What did you have in mind? Could we help decorate the ceremony site? Just the basic setup. I promise we won't mess with your professional arrangements." An hour later, Jessica found herself standing knee-deep in snow with the bride, groom, and Mark, setting up a wooden arch that Yusuf had built for outdoor ceremonies. It was simple but beautiful, made from local pine and designed to frame the lake view behind it. "This is where we'll exchange vows," Royalty said softly, standing under the arch with Marco. "Right here, with the mountains watching and the lake reflecting our promises." Marco wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Perfect." Jessica watched them together and felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't just about creating a beautiful event anymore. This was about witnessing the beginning of a marriage, celebrating love, creating memories that would last a lifetime. "Jessica," Mark said quietly, appearing beside her with an armload of pine boughs. "You okay?" "Yes. Better than okay, actually." She took some of the greenery from him, their fingers brushing in the process. "This is what weddings should feel like, isn't it?" "What do you mean?" "Joyful, collaborative, about the people, not just the performance." Mark's smile was warm and proud. "Yeah, that's exactly what they should feel like." As the afternoon progressed, Jessica found herself working alongside Mark to transform the ceremony site. They strung lights through the arch, arranged pine boughs and holly along the makeshift aisle, and set up chairs in semicircular rows that would give everyone a perfect view of both the couple and the mountain scenery. "You're good at this," Mark said as they adjusted the angle of the arch for better lake views. "At what?" "Letting go. Being flexible. Rolling with the changes." "I don't feel very flexible. I feel terrified that something important will go wrong." "But you're handling the changes anyway." "That takes courage." Jessica hadn't thought of her responses as courageous. She'd been so focused on preventing disasters that she hadn't noticed she was actually adapting and problem-solving in ways that improved the overall celebration. "I guess I'm learning," she said. "We all are. That's what makes life interesting." As the sun began to set, painting the snow-covered mountains pink and gold, the four of them stood back to admire their work. The ceremony site looked magical, rustic and elegant, perfectly suited to its mountain setting, and clearly created with love. "It's beautiful," Royalty said softly. "Even more beautiful than I imagined." "And it's ours," Marco added. "We helped make it." Jessica understood what he meant. There was something special about creating the space where they'd get married, about investing their own labor and love in the setting for their vows. "Thank you," Royalty said, turning to Jessica and Mark, "for letting us be part of this, for making our wedding feel like a celebration instead of just an event." As they walked back to the lodge through the deepening twilight, Jessica realized that something fundamental had shifted in her approach to event planning. She was still committed to creating perfection, but her definition of perfection was expanding to include joy, authenticity, and the couple's genuine happiness. "Hungry?" Mark asked as they reached the lodge. "Fernanda's making her famous chili tonight." "Starving," Jessica replied, realizing she'd been so absorbed in the day's activities that she'd forgotten to eat lunch. Inside the warm, welcoming great room, with the fire crackling and Christmas lights twinkling, Jessica felt more relaxed and content than she had in years. She was dirty, exhausted, and completely off her normal schedule, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd been this happy. December 22nd dawned clear and cold, with the kind of crystalline mountain air that made everything look sharper and more beautiful. Jessica woke up in her hotel room, feeling genuinely excited about the day ahead, a sensation so unusual that it took her a moment to identify it. 2 days until the wedding, and instead of her normal pre-event panic, she felt confident, ready, even eager to see how all the pieces would come together. Her phone showed a text from Mark, coffee and planning session at the lodge. Fernanda made cinnamon rolls. Jessica found herself smiling as she typed back, "On my way." 40 minutes later, she was seated at the lodge's kitchen island with Mark and Fernanda, working through the final timeline, while sampling what might have been the best cinnamon rolls ever created by human hands. "So the musicians arrive at 2 o'clock, Jessica said, checking her tablet. "They'll need an hour to set up and sound check. Flowers are being delivered at 3. The rental company will be here at 4 with the additional tables and chairs for the reception." "And the bride and groom arrive when?" Fernanda asked. "Tomorrow afternoon, along with the wedding party and most of the family. I've got all the guest cabins ready," Mark said. "Fresh linens, firewood stocked, welcome baskets from Fernanda. The bridal cabin has the extra lighting you requested, and I managed to find a proper vanity mirror." Jessica looked up from her tablet. "You found a vanity mirror? Antique piece from Fiona's shop. Victorian, with good lighting and plenty of space for getting ready." "That's perfect. Thank you." Jessica made a note, then paused. "Actually, thank you for everything. I know this isn't what you normally do." "I'm enjoying it," Mark said simply. "It's fun to see the place being used for something special." Fernanda refilled their coffee cups and settled back onto her stool. "Can I ask you two something?" "Of course," Jessica replied. "Are you going to dance at the reception?" The question caught Jessica off guard. "Dance? Together," Fernanda clarified with a knowing smile. "I've been watching you work together this week, and there's something sparky between you." Jessica felt her cheeks warm. "We're just collaborating on the wedding." "Uh-huh." Fernanda's expression was deeply skeptical. "And I'm just a cook." Mark cleared his throat, looking amused but also slightly uncomfortable. "Fernanda doesn't believe in subtle hints." "Life's too short for subtle," Fernanda declared. "You two like each other. Anyone with eyes can see it." "We barely know each other," Jessica protested. "You know enough," Fernanda said firmly. "I've seen how you look at him when you think no one's watching, and Mark hasn't stopped smiling since you got here." "Fernanda," Mark said with gentle warning. "What? I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You're both single, you're both wonderful people, and you obviously enjoy each other's company. What's the problem?" The problem, Jessica realized, was that Fernanda was absolutely right. Over the past few days, she had begun to feel something for Mark that went far beyond professional collaboration. The way he listened when she talked, the confidence with which he solved problems, the easy way he moved through his world, it all appealed to her in ways that were both exciting and terrifying. "I live in the city," Jessica said finally. "My life is there. Cities have airports," Fernanda pointed out. "Mountains have roads. It's not the 1800s. Before anyone could respond to that observation, the sound of vehicles arriving in the parking lot interrupted the conversation. Through the kitchen windows, Jessica could see 2 large trucks pulling up to the lodge. "That must be the rental delivery," she said, grateful for the distraction. "They're early." The next several hours were a whirlwind of activity as various vendors arrived to transform the lodge for the wedding. The rental company brought elegant tables, chairs, and linens for the reception. Fiona arrived with her van full of floral arrangements that exceeded even Jessica's expectations. The musicians showed up for their sound check and immediately charmed everyone with acoustic versions of classic wedding songs. By late afternoon, the lodge had been transformed into a wedding venue that managed to be both sophisticated and authentically rustic. The great room now held round tables dressed in cream linens with centerpieces of white roses, red berries, and silver-dusted pine cones. The ceremony site by the lake looked like something from a fairy tale, with the wooden arch framed by evergreen garlands and the chairs arranged in perfect rows facing the mountain view. "It's incredible," Jessica said, standing in the great room and surveying the scene. "Better than I imagined." "You did good," Mark said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of wine. "This is going to be a beautiful wedding." "We did good," Jessica corrected, accepting the wine gratefully. "I couldn't have pulled this off without your help." I think you could have pulled off anything you set your mind to. There was something in his voice that made Jessica look at him more closely. His brown eyes were warm and serious, and the way he was looking at her made her heart beat faster. Mark, I know, he said softly. You live in the city. Your life is there. I get it. Do you? No, not really. But I'm trying to respect it. Jessica felt something inside her chest crack open. All week, she'd been telling herself that her attraction to Mark was just a temporary reaction to being in a beautiful place with an attractive man. But standing here in the transformed lodge, seeing what they'd accomplished together, she realized it was much more than that. What if I said my life in the city isn't as satisfying as I thought it was? She asked quietly. I'd say that's something worth exploring. And what if I said I'm scared of what that might mean? I'd say that's normal. Change is scary. Jessica sipped her wine, gathering courage. What if I said I've been happier this week than I've been in years? Mark's smile was soft and genuine. I'd say I've been feeling the same way. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the early evening light filter through the windows and cast golden patterns on the reception tables. Outside, snow was beginning to fall again, just light flakes that added to the magical atmosphere without threatening the next day's ceremony. Can I tell you something? Mark said eventually. Of course, when I first decided to buy this lodge, people thought I was crazy, giving up a successful career to run a small business in the mountains. They said I was throwing my life away. But you didn't think so? I knew I was trading one kind of life for another, a more complicated life for a simpler one, more success for more satisfaction. It was scary, but it was also right. Jessica understood what he was trying to tell her. You think I might be at a similar crossroads? I think you're the only one who can answer that, but I hope you'll at least consider the possibility that there might be other ways to live. Before Jessica could respond, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and sighed when she saw her biggest client's name. I should take this, she told Mark apologetically. Miranda Ashworth calling, her phone announced in her assistant's voice. She says it's urgent. Jessica stepped into Mark's office for privacy and answered the call. Miranda, what can I do for you? Jessica, darling, I need you to save my life. Miranda's voice carried the dramatic flair that made her both a successful socialite and an exhausting client. Charles and I are hosting a New Year's Eve party, and our event planner just canceled. Food poisoning or some such excuse. You simply must help us. Miranda, I'm in the middle of an event right now, and New Year's Eve is barely a week away. Which is why I need the best. That's you, darling. I'll pay double your usual fee, plus bonuses for the rush job. It's just 200 people, cocktails and dancing. Nothing too elaborate, just 200 people. Jessica almost laughed. Miranda's definition of nothing too elaborate usually involved ice sculptures, celebrity entertainment, and imported champagne. I don't think I can help you, Jessica said. I'm committed through the holidays. Committed to what? Some little mountain wedding? Jessica, this is the Ashworth New Year's party. Everyone who matters will be there. This could make your career. Jessica felt the familiar tug of ambition and professional opportunity. The Ashworth party would indeed be a career-defining event, with guest lists that read like the society pages and budgets that allowed for unlimited creativity. Let me think about it, she said finally. I'll call you back tomorrow. Don't think too long, darling. I'll have to find someone else if you can't commit by tomorrow night. After ending the call, Jessica sat in Mark's office feeling torn. The Ashworth party represented everything she'd worked toward: prestige, recognition, and the kind of high-profile event that would secure her reputation for years to come. But it also meant returning to the world of demanding clients, impossible deadlines, and events that were more about status than celebration. It meant leaving Pine Valley, leaving the lodge, leaving. Everything okay? Mark appeared in the doorway, looking concerned. Work crisis, Jessica said. A client who needs an event planner for New Year's Eve. That's good, right? More business? It would be a very important client. Career-changing, probably. Mark studied her expression. But it would mean leaving here immediately after the wedding. Going back to the city, diving straight into another high-pressure event. And you're not sure that's what you want? Jessica looked at him, really looked at him. His dark hair was slightly mussed from the day's work. His flannel shirt had sawdust on one sleeve from moving tables, and his brown eyes were warm with genuine concern for her dilemma. He represented everything that was different about this week: authenticity, simplicity, and a focus on what really mattered. "I'm not sure of anything anymore," she admitted. Mark came into the office and sat on the edge of his desk, close enough that she could smell his soap and see the small scar on his chin that she'd noticed the first day. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure. When you're planning these big city events, do you ever have moments like today, where you step back and feel genuinely proud of what you've created?" Jessica thought about her usual events, flawless, elegant, and completely forgettable the moment they were over. "Not really. I feel relieved when they go well, but not proud." "What about happy? Do you feel happy during the events?" "I feel successful." "That's not the same thing." Jessica realized he was right. Success and happiness had become so intertwined in her mind that she'd forgotten they were different things entirely. "What about today?" Mark asked. "How do you feel about tomorrow's wedding?" "Excited," Jessica said without hesitation. "Proud, happy, like we've created something really special. Because you have. And because you've been part of something meaningful instead of just managing something perfect." The office was quiet except for the sound of voices in the great room as the musicians packed up their equipment. Through the windows, Jessica could see the ceremony site glowing with the soft light of the luminaries they'd placed along the aisle. "Mark," she said quietly. "Yeah? What would happen if I stayed through New Year's?" His eyes brightened with hope and something that might have been relief. "You mean here? At the lodge?" "I mean, what if I didn't take the Ashworth job? What if I stayed to see what this feels like when it's not a work emergency?" "I think," Mark said carefully, "that would be the best Christmas present I could imagine." Jessica felt something settle into place in her chest, like a puzzle piece finding its proper spot. "Then maybe that's what I'll do." Mark's smile was radiant. "Really? Really? But I should warn you, I don't really know how to take a vacation, or relax, or do anything that isn't work-related. Lucky for you, I'm an expert at all of those things." "You'll teach me?" "I'll teach you everything I know." Jessica felt a thrill of anticipation that had nothing to do with wedding planning and everything to do with the man sitting across from her. "I should call Miranda back. Now, before I lose my nerve." Mark nodded and stood up. "I'll give you some privacy." "Actually," Jessica said, surprising herself, "would you stay? For moral support?" "Of course." Jessica dialed Miranda's number, her heart beating fast with nervous excitement. When her client answered, Jessica took a deep breath and said the words that felt like jumping off a cliff and learning to fly at the same time. "Miranda, I'm sorry, but I won't be able to help with your New Year's party. I'm taking some time off." The silence on the other end of the line was profound. "Time off?" Miranda's voice suggested this was a concept she'd never encountered. "Jessica, darling, you don't take time off. You're a workaholic. Apparently, I'm learning to be something else." After ending the call, Jessica looked at Mark and felt giddy with the magnitude of what she'd just done. She'd turned down the biggest opportunity of her career to stay in a mountain lodge with a man she'd known for less than a week. It should have felt terrifying. Instead, it felt like coming home. "So," Mark said, his eyes dancing with mischief and affection, "what would you like to learn first? How to build a proper fire, how to make snow angels, how to appreciate a sunset without checking your phone? How about," Jessica said, standing up and moving closer to him, "how to stop overthinking everything and just follow my instincts?" "That's an excellent place to start." Mark reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "What are your instincts telling you right now? That I've been waiting my whole life for this moment without even knowing it. And that I'm tired of waiting." When Mark kissed her, it was everything Jessica hadn't known she was looking for. Gentle but sure, warm and welcoming, like coming home to a place she'd never been but had always belonged. She could taste wine on his lips and smell the pine scent that seemed to cling to everything in this magical place. When they finally broke apart, Jessica felt dizzy with happiness and possibility. "Wow," she whispered. "Yeah," Mark agreed, his forehead resting against hers. "Wow." Outside, the snow continued to fall, adding to the winter wonderland that would serve as the backdrop for tomorrow's wedding. Inside the lodge, the reception tables gleamed with crystal and candlelight, ready to host a celebration of love and new beginnings. And in Mark's office, Jessica Thorne discovered that sometimes the most important events weren't the ones you planned, they were the ones that happened when you finally stopped trying to control every detail and let life surprise you. December 23rd should have been a day of final preparations and excited anticipation. Instead, it began with the kind of crisis that could destroy a wedding and end a career. Jessica's phone started ringing at 6 in the morning while she was still in her hotel room, getting dressed for what she'd expected to be a busy but manageable day. The caller ID showed Everly's number, and her assistant's voice was tight with panic. "Jessica, we have a major problem. The worst possible problem." Still groggy from the wine and the emotional intensity of the previous evening, Jessica sat down heavily on the hotel room bed. "What kind of problem?" "The cake. Marchetti's can't deliver." Jessica's stomach dropped. "What do you mean they can't deliver? There's a massive storm system moving through the valley between here and the city. The roads are already impassable, and it's supposed to get worse. The delivery truck can't make it up the mountain." Jessica closed her eyes, trying to think through the implications. The wedding cake was more than just dessert. It was a centerpiece, a symbol, a crucial element of the reception that dozens of photographers would capture for posterity. "What about our backup plan?" she asked. That was having Fernanda make a simple cake if needed. "But Jessica, this is the hall wedding. They're expecting a 5-tier masterpiece from the city's best patisserie. I don't think a home baker's going to cut it." Jessica felt the familiar clench of panic in her chest. This was exactly the kind of disaster she'd spent her career preventing. The bride and groom were arriving in 6 hours, expecting perfection, and she was about to tell them that the wedding cake they'd carefully selected and tasted months ago wasn't going to exist. "I'll figure something out," she told Everly. "Keep trying to reach Marchetti's. Maybe the weather will improve." "Jessica, the storm is supposed to last through Christmas Day. There's no way they can deliver." After ending the call, Jessica sat in her hotel room, feeling the weight of impending failure. She'd been so confident yesterday, so sure that everything was under control. Now she was facing the possibility of disappointing royalty and Marco on their wedding day. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "Coffee and last-minute planning? The lodge looks incredible this morning." Jessica stared at the message, realizing she was going to have to tell him about the cake disaster. She was going to have to admit that all her careful planning and city connections had failed when it really mattered. An hour later, she was sitting in the lodge's kitchen with Mark and Fernanda, explaining the situation while trying to keep her voice steady. "So there's no cake," Fernanda said thoughtfully. "That's a problem." "It's more than a problem," Jessica replied. "It's a disaster. The Hall family expects a certain level of sophistication. I can't serve them a homemade cake and pretend it's what they ordered." Mark leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Why not?" "Because it's not what they paid for. It's not what they expect. It's not." Jessica struggled for words. "It's not professional." "Says who?" Fernanda asked. "Says everyone. Says the industry standards and client expectations and—" Jessica stopped, hearing how she sounded. "Says me." "What if," Mark said carefully, "the homemade cake was better than the fancy one from the city?" "That's not the point, isn't it? I thought the point was to make royalty and Marco happy on their wedding day." Jessica felt her carefully maintained composure cracking. "The point is to deliver what I promised. The point is to maintain my professional reputation. The point is to not let down clients who trust me to handle every detail perfectly. And if the weather makes that impossible, then I find another way. That's what I do. I solve problems." Fernanda cleared her throat. "Can I say something?" "Of course," Jessica replied. "I make a really good wedding cake." Jessica looked at the lodge's cook. seeing her work-worn hands and flour-dusted apron and simple, honest face. "I'm sure you do, but this is a very sophisticated clientele. I know. That's why I've been practicing." "Practicing?" Fernanda stood up and moved to one of the large freezers. "I had a feeling something like this might happen. Mountain weather is unpredictable, so I made a few samples." She pulled out what looked like individual cake layers wrapped in plastic. "Different flavors, different techniques. I wanted to be ready just in case." Mark grinned. "Fernanda, you're brilliant. I'm just practical," Fernanda replied. But she looked pleased. "Jessica, would you at least try the samples before you decide?" Jessica wanted to say no. She wanted to insist on finding a city baker who could somehow navigate the storm, or convince Marchettis to risk their delivery truck on impassable roads. She wanted to maintain control over every element of the wedding, but looking at Fernanda's hopeful face and Mark's encouraging expression, she found herself nodding. The cake tasting that followed was a revelation. Fernanda had created layers of vanilla bean sponge with fresh berry filling, chocolate cake with salted caramel mousse, and lemon cake with lavender buttercream. Each flavor was sophisticated, complex, and absolutely delicious. "This is incredible," Jessica admitted, trying the lemon-lavender combination. "How did you learn to bake like this?" "I worked in restaurant kitchens before I came here," Fernanda explained. "Not fancy places, but I learned from some very good pastry chefs, and I've been perfecting my techniques for 15 years. "Could you make a 5-tier cake by tomorrow afternoon?" "Already started the foundation layers. They're cooling in the walk-in cooler. I just need to know what flavors you want and how you want it decorated." Jessica felt a glimmer of hope. "What about decorating?" The original cake was very elegant, with sugar flowers and detailed piping. "I'm not as fancy as a city patisserie," Fernanda admitted, "but I know how to make a beautiful cake. Want me to show you some pictures of my work?" Fernanda pulled out her phone and scrolled through photos of wedding cakes she'd made over the years. They were simpler than the elaborate confections Jessica was used to, but they were also warm, inviting, and clearly made with love and skill. "They're beautiful," Jessica said, and meant it. "But I'm not sure they're what the Hall family is expecting." "Maybe," Mark suggested, "it's time to ask what they actually want, instead of assuming what they expect." Jessica looked at him, feeling challenged and supported at the same time. "What do you mean?" "I mean, royalty and Marco chose this lodge because they wanted something authentic. Maybe they'd prefer an authentic mountain wedding cake to a fancy city creation, or maybe they'll be disappointed that their wedding planner couldn't deliver what she promised. There's only one way to find out." Before Jessica could respond, the sound of vehicles arriving interrupted their discussion. Through the kitchen windows, she could see a convoy of SUVs pulling into the lodge's parking area. "That's them," she said, her stomach clenching with anxiety. "The wedding party is here." The next few minutes were a whirlwind of arrivals and greetings. Royalty emerged from the lead SUV, looking radiant with excitement, followed by Marco and what appeared to be their entire extended families. The energy was infectious, laughter and excited chatter, and the kind of joy that comes with long-anticipated celebrations. "Jessica!" Royalty practically bounced across the snow to embrace her. "Everything looks absolutely magical. The decorations, the ceremony site, it's even more beautiful than I imagined." "Thank you," Jessica managed. "There's something I need to discuss with you, though. A change in plans." "Oh, good," Royalty said cheerfully. "I love changes. They make everything more exciting." Jessica blinked. "You love changes?" "Sure. Planned surprises are just as wonderful as unplanned ones, don't you think?" Before Jessica could figure out how to respond to that logic, she found herself swept into the great room with the entire wedding party, explaining the cake situation while trying to maintain some semblance of professional composure. "So the bakery can't deliver because of the storm," she concluded. "But we have an alternative. Fernanda, our lodge cook, makes excellent wedding cakes, and she's offered to create something special for you." Jessica braced herself for disappointment, concern, or the kind of polite dissatisfaction that preceded difficult conversations with clients. Instead, Royalty clapped her hands together with delight. "Fernanda's making our cake? That's perfect. I was hoping we'd have more local touches in the wedding. You were? Jessica asked weakly. Absolutely. A mountain wedding should have mountain touches. Store-bought feels so impersonal, don't you think? Marco nodded agreement. I'd much rather have cake made by someone who cares about our celebration than something shipped from the city. Jessica stared at them, realizing that her clients were not only unconcerned about the change, they were actively excited about it. All her worry and professional anxiety had been completely unnecessary. So you're happy with this solution? She asked. We're thrilled, Royalty said firmly. Fernanda, what flavors can you make? The impromptu cake consultation that followed was unlike anything in Jessica's professional experience. Instead of careful tastings and formal presentations, it was a warm, collaborative discussion in the lodge's kitchen, with multiple family members offering opinions and Fernanda beaming with pride as she described her options. We'll take all 3 flavors, Royalty decided after trying the samples. Different tiers, so everyone can try everything. And for decorating, I want it to feel like winter and Christmas without being too obviously themed. I was thinking white buttercream with fresh berries and maybe some sugared cranberries, Fernanda suggested. And some real pine sprigs. Clean ones, safe for food. Keep it natural and elegant. Perfect, Marco said. Exactly what we wanted. As Jessica watched this conversation unfold, she realized something important was happening. Her clients weren't disappointed by the change in plans. They were energized by it. They liked being part of the solution, liked the personal touch of having their cake made by someone they'd met and connected with. Jessica, Royalty said, pulling her aside as the cake discussion concluded, thank you for handling this so well. I know it probably stressed you out, but this feels so much more special than having some anonymous bakery make our cake. You're really not disappointed? Are you kidding? This is the best thing that could have happened. Fernanda is part of our wedding story now. The cake will mean something. Jessica felt her anxiety beginning to ease, replaced by something that might have been wonder. I've never had clients react this way to a change in plans. Maybe you've never had the right kind of change in plans, or the right kind of clients. Before Jessica could process that observation, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and felt her stomach drop again when she saw her assistant's number. Excuse me, she told Royalty, I need to take this. Jessica, we have another problem, Everly said without preamble. The florist can't get here. What? Fiona's local. The storm shouldn't affect her. Not Fiona. The backup florist you hired from the city. She was supposed to deliver the additional arrangements this morning, but her delivery truck slid off the road about 50 miles from here. No one was hurt, but all the flowers are ruined. Jessica closed her eyes. The backup floral arrangements were supposed to supplement Fiona's work. Extra centerpieces, additional boutonnieres, and the elaborate altar arrangements that would complete the ceremony decor. How much of the floral design are we missing? Jessica asked. About 40%. Enough to make a noticeable difference. Jessica felt the familiar panic rising again. First the cake, now the flowers. At this rate, she was going to have to explain to the Hall family that their elegant mountain wedding was turning into a rustic improvisation. I'll figure something out, she told Everly. Keep me posted if anything else goes wrong. She ended the call and stood in the lodge's great room, surrounded by happy wedding guests and trying to calculate how many more disasters she could handle before the whole event fell apart. More bad news? Mark appeared at her elbow. The backup florist can't deliver. We're missing half the flower arrangements. What can I do to help? Jessica looked at him, feeling overwhelmed and grateful and slightly hysterical. You can't fix the weather or make flowers appear out of thin air. No, but I might know someone who can help with the flower situation. Another florist? Sort of. Give me 5 minutes to make a phone call. Mark disappeared, leaving Jessica to smile and chat with wedding guests, while privately calculating the odds of the entire event becoming a disaster. She was so absorbed in her mental crisis management that she almost missed the moment when everything began to change. It started with Charlie Nelson, the maid of honor, commenting on the lodge's Christmas decorations. These are gorgeous, she said, touching one of the pine bough arrangements, so much more authentic than the usual wedding flowers. "Aren't they lovely?" agreed the mother of the bride. "They smell wonderful too." Other family members began chiming in with similar observations. The natural decorations were beautiful, they said, elegant in their simplicity, perfect for the setting. Jessica realized, with growing amazement, that the wedding guests were falling in love with the rustic charm that she'd been trying to supplement with sophisticated city florals. "Jessica," Marco's mother said, "wherever did you find such beautiful natural decorations?" "They're actually just pine boughs and holly from the local area," Jessica replied. "We use them to complement the more formal arrangements." "Well, I think they're the most beautiful part of the whole design. So authentic and seasonal." Mark reappeared with a satisfied expression and news that made Jessica's heart skip with relief. "I called Fiona. She's on her way over with everything she's got in her greenhouse. Says she can pull together enough additional arrangements to fill in whatever we're missing." "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. She's excited about the challenge, and she's bringing her neighbor Mrs. Wright to help. Apparently she used to do floral arrangements for her antique shop." Jessica felt tears of gratitude threatening. "They're willing to drop everything to help with our wedding?" "That's what people do here. They help each other." The next few hours were unlike anything Jessica had experienced in her professional career. Instead of orchestrating vendors and managing logistics from a distance, she found herself working alongside Fiona and Mrs. Wright to create additional floral arrangements using whatever materials were available. They raided the forest around the lodge for pine boughs, holly branches, and interesting pieces of bark. They used Fernanda's herb garden to add fragrant touches of rosemary and sage. They created centerpieces from mason jars filled with cranberries and floating candles. "This is so much more interesting than formal arrangements," Mrs. Wright said as they worked. "Everything has meaning and connection to the place. And it smells incredible," added Charlie, who had insisted on helping despite Jessica's protests that wedding party members shouldn't be working. By late afternoon, the lodge had been transformed into something that was both more rustic and more elegant than Jessica's original vision. The natural materials complemented the sophisticated lighting and table settings, creating an atmosphere that was warm, welcoming, and undeniably magical. "It's perfect," Royalty said, standing in the great room and looking around with obvious delight. "Even more beautiful than I imagined." Jessica looked around too, seeing not the compromises and improvisations she'd been forced to make, but the collaborative effort that had created something unique and meaningful. "I have to admit," she said to Mark, "this isn't what I planned, but it might be better than what I planned." Sometimes the best things happen when we stop trying to control everything. As the afternoon progressed, Jessica began to relax into the rhythm of the lodge and the wedding celebration. The crises had been solved, the guests were happy, and everything was coming together in ways that felt organic and joyful. Then her phone rang. Miranda Ashworth calling, announced her assistant's voice. "She says it's extremely urgent." Jessica glanced at Mark, who was helping arrange chairs for the next day's ceremony. She could ignore the call, but Miranda wasn't the type to give up easily. "I should take this," she told Mark. "It'll just be a minute." But as soon as she answered the phone, Jessica knew this wasn't going to be a quick conversation. "Jessica, darling, I'm so glad I caught you. I have the most marvelous news about the New Year's party." "Miranda, I told you I couldn't help with that." "Yes, but circumstances have changed. The substitute planner I hired has turned out to be completely incompetent. The vendor contracts are a mess, the timeline is impossible, and Charles is threatening to cancel the whole thing." Jessica felt the familiar tug of professional obligation. Miranda was one of her most important clients, with connections throughout the social establishment. Disappointing her could have serious consequences for Jessica's business. "I'm sorry to hear that," Jessica said carefully, "but I'm committed to another event right now. A tiny mountain wedding versus the social event of the season." "Jessica, you're being ridiculous. I'll pay triple your usual fee, plus bonuses, plus a recommendation to every important family in the city." Triple her usual fee. Jessica did quick mental calculations. That kind of money would fund her business for the next 6 months, allowing her to be more selective about clients and projects. "I don't know," she said. "I've made commitments here." "To whom?" Some random mountain people who will never hire you again anyway? Jessica, this is your career we're talking about, your future. Jessica looked through the windows at the ceremony site where Mark was adjusting the decorations they'd worked on together. She could see wedding guests exploring the property, their laughter carrying across the snow. This was exactly what Miranda meant. Random mountain people who would never be part of Jessica's professional network. When would you need me? Jessica heard herself asking. Tomorrow afternoon. I know it's Christmas Eve, but we could helicopter you back to the city. You'd be here in plenty of time to start coordinating the event. Tomorrow afternoon, right after royalty and Marco's ceremony. I need to think about it, Jessica said. Don't think too long, darling. I need an answer by tonight. After ending the call, Jessica stood outside the lodge feeling torn between two different worlds. One represented everything she'd worked to achieve: prestige, financial success, and recognition in her field. The other represented something she was just beginning to understand: genuine satisfaction, authentic connections, and work that felt meaningful. Everything okay? Mark appeared beside her, looking concerned. Work call. Another client who needs help. The same one from yesterday? Yes. She's offering me a lot of money to leave tomorrow and handle her New Year's party. Mark was quiet for a long moment. What are you going to tell her? I don't know. Jessica looked at him, seeing the disappointment he was trying to hide. This could be really important for my career. I thought you were taking time off. Learning to live differently.
I am.
But this is a lot of money, Mark, and an opportunity that might not come again. There will always be another opportunity, another client, another event, another crisis that only you can solve. You don't understand. This isn't just any client. This could change everything for me professionally. And what about personally? What about what you discovered this week? Jessica felt the painful pull between security and possibility, between the life she'd built and the life she was starting to imagine. I don't know if I'm brave enough to choose the unknown over the sure thing, she admitted. Mark's expression was understanding but sad. I guess that's something you'll have to figure out. As they walked back toward the lodge, Jessica realized that the most important decision of her life was waiting for her answer, and she had no idea what that answer should be. Christmas Eve morning dawned with the kind of pristine beauty that made Jessica understand why people wrote poetry about winter in the mountains. The snow had stopped during the night, leaving everything covered in a sparkling blanket that looked like it had been sprinkled with diamonds. The air was crisp and still. The lake reflected the snow-covered peaks like a mirror, and the whole world felt hushed and magical. Jessica stood at her hotel room window, watching the sunrise paint the mountains pink and gold, and felt her heart breaking a little. In a few hours she would witness royalty and Marco's wedding, a celebration that had become more meaningful to her than any event she'd ever planned. And then she would have to decide whether to stay in this magical place with Mark or return to the city and the career that had defined her for so many years. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Miranda and 2 text messages, each one more urgent than the last. The final message was blunt. Need answer by 10 a.m. or I'm hiring someone else. This is your last chance. Jessica checked the time. 9:15. In 45 minutes, she would have to choose between the life she knew and the life she was just beginning to imagine. She dressed carefully in the outfit she'd selected for the wedding, a deep blue dress that was elegant enough for the occasion, but warm enough for the mountain weather. As she applied her makeup, she tried to ignore the way her hands were shaking. At 9:30, she drove to the lodge through a landscape that looked like a Christmas card come to life. The guest cabins were picture-perfect with their snow-covered roofs and twinkling lights. The ceremony site by the lake looked like something from a fairy tale, with the wooden arch framed by evergreen garlands and the chairs arranged in perfect rows. Inside the lodge, she found controlled chaos as the wedding party prepared for the ceremony. Royalty was getting ready in the bridal cabin with Charlie and her mother, while Marco and his groomsmen were in the main lodge with Fernanda, who was putting finishing touches on what might have been the most beautiful wedding cake Jessica had ever seen. Jessica! Fernanda beamed as she approached. Perfect timing. What do you think? The cake was a masterpiece. 5 tiers of white buttercream decorated with fresh berries, sugared cranberries, and delicate sprigs of pine. It managed to be both elegant and natural. Sophisticated and warm, it looked exactly like what it was, a creation made with love for a couple's special day. "It's absolutely perfect," Jessica said, and meant it. "Royalty and Marco are going to love it." "I hope so. I've never been this nervous about a cake before." "You shouldn't be nervous. It's beautiful." Jessica's phone buzzed with another text from Miranda. "Time's running out. Need answer now." "Excuse me," Jessica told Fernanda. "I need to step outside for a moment." The morning air was sharp and clean, making her lungs ache in the best possible way. Jessica found herself walking toward the ceremony site, where Mark was making final adjustments to the decorations. "How's everything going?" he asked, looking up from the pine boughs he was arranging. "Good. Great, actually. Fernanda's cake is incredible, and Royalty looks like she's going to float away with happiness." "And how are you doing?" Jessica looked at him, really looked at him. His hair was slightly mussed from working outside, his cheeks were pink from the cold, and his brown eyes were warm with concern and something deeper. He was wearing a navy suit that made him look devastatingly handsome, but it was the way he moved through his space with such confidence and care that made her heart skip. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of the wedding? Of the choice I have to make." Mark straightened up, giving her his full attention. "Want to talk about it?" "Miranda needs an answer in 10 minutes. If I say yes, I can helicopter back to the city this afternoon and save my career. If I say no..." Jessica shrugged helplessly. "I don't know what happens if I say no. What does your gut tell you?" "My gut is terrified. This is the biggest opportunity I've ever been offered. The kind of event that could set me up for years." "That's your brain talking, not your gut." Jessica was quiet for a moment, trying to separate her analytical thoughts from her deeper instincts. "My gut says I've been happier this week than I've been in years. My gut says I want to know what it feels like to wake up here every morning. My gut says I want to see where this thing between us goes. And my gut might be wrong. What if I give up everything I've worked for and it doesn't work out? What if I can't handle living in a small town? What if you get tired of having a stressed-out city person disrupting your peaceful mountain life?" Mark stepped closer, close enough that she could see the small lines around his eyes and smell his soap. "What if it's the best decision you ever make? What if it's the worst? Then you'll figure out the next step. That's what brave people do. They take risks and figure out how to handle whatever happens." "I don't feel brave. I feel terrified." "Good. That means it matters." Jessica's phone rang, and Miranda's name appeared on the screen. "Decision time. I need to take this," she told Mark. "Jessica, darling." Miranda's voice was sharp with impatience. "I've been waiting for your call. Please tell me you've come to your senses about this absurd mountain vacation." Jessica looked at the ceremony site, with its simple wooden arch and mountain backdrop. She thought about the week she'd spent here, learning to let go of control and embrace the unexpected. She thought about the way Mark made her laugh, the way Fernanda had welcomed her into the Lodge family, the way Royalty and Marco had trusted her to create something meaningful for their special day. "Miranda," she said quietly, "I'm not coming back." The silence on the other end of the line was profound. "Excuse me? I'm not taking the job. I'm staying here." "Jessica, you're making a terrible mistake. You're throwing away your career for some ridiculous romantic fantasy." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. You'll regret this. When the novelty wears off and you're stuck in the middle of nowhere with no clients and no future, you'll wish you'd listened to me." "You might be right, but I have to find out for myself." Jessica ended the call and immediately turned off her phone. She didn't want to think about consequences or second-guess her decision. She wanted to focus on the wedding, on celebrating love, on being present for this perfect moment. "So?" Mark asked. "I'm staying, at least through New Year's. Maybe longer." Mark's smile was radiant. "Really? Really? Though I should warn you, I have no idea how to not work, or how to live in a small town, or how to date someone without treating it like a project to be managed. Lucky for you, I have lots of experience with all of those things." You'll be patient with me, Jessica. I'll be whatever you need me to be. Before she could respond to that promise, the sound of music drifted across the snow. The Pine Valley musicians had begun the prelude, filling the air with acoustic versions of classical pieces that sounded even more beautiful in the mountain setting than a string quartet would have. "Time to get this wedding started," Mark said. The ceremony that followed was everything Jessica had hoped it would be, and more than she had imagined possible. Royalty walked down the aisle on her father's arm, radiant in a simple but elegant dress that complemented the natural setting perfectly. Marco waited for her under the pine bough arch, his face glowing with love and joy. The vows they exchanged were personal and heartfelt, bringing tears to Jessica's eyes and making her believe in the power of love and commitment in ways she'd forgotten were possible. When they kissed as husband and wife, the mountains seemed to echo with the joy of their families and friends. But what moved Jessica most was the sense of community that surrounded the celebration. This wasn't just a beautiful event. It was a gathering of people who genuinely cared about the couple and wanted to celebrate their happiness. It felt real and meaningful in ways that her usual society weddings never had. "Beautiful ceremony," Mark said, appearing beside her as the wedding party posed for photos by the lake. "Perfect," Jessica agreed. Everything came together exactly as it should have. Even with all the changes and crises, especially because of the changes and crises, it feels more authentic this way, more personal. The reception that followed was a revelation. Instead of the formal, choreographed events Jessica usually planned, this celebration had an organic, joyful energy that seemed to grow throughout the evening. The food was delicious, the music was infectious, and the toasts were genuinely moving. Jessica found herself dancing with Mark as the Pine Valley musicians played acoustic versions of love songs, feeling more relaxed and happy than she could remember being at any wedding she'd planned. "You look beautiful," Mark said, spinning her gently under the twinkling lights. "I feel beautiful. Different, but beautiful." "Different how?" "Lighter, like I've been carrying around weight I didn't even know I had, and it's finally gone. That's what happens when you stop trying to be perfect and start trying to be happy." As the evening progressed, Jessica realized that this wedding had taught her something important about her profession and her life. The best celebrations weren't about flawless execution or impressive logistics. They were about creating space for love and joy and authentic connection. "Jessica," royalty appeared at her elbow, glowing with happiness and slightly breathless from dancing. "I need to thank you for everything. This has been the most perfect day of my life. I'm so glad. You and Marco deserve all the happiness in the world. But I especially want to thank you for rolling with all the changes. The cake, the flowers, the music. Everything turned out better than we originally planned because you were flexible and creative. I had a lot of help. You had a lot of heart. That's what made the difference." Later, as the reception wound down and the wedding guests began to drift back to their cabins, Jessica found herself sitting by the fire with Mark. Still in their wedding attire, but with their shoes kicked off and their feet tangled together. "So," Mark said, "what happens now? Now I figure out how to live a different kind of life. Any ideas where to start?" Jessica thought about it. "I think I'd like to learn how to make Fernanda's hot chocolate and how to identify different types of pine trees and how to build a proper fire. That's a good start. What else? I think I'd like to help plan more weddings like this one. Events that feel real and meaningful instead of just impressive. You could do that from here, you know. Be the wedding planner who specializes in authentic mountain celebrations." The idea sent a thrill of excitement through Jessica. "You think there would be a market for that? I think there are a lot of couples like Royalty and Marco who want something real instead of something perfect. And I think," Jessica said, leaning closer to Mark, "I'd like to learn how to have a relationship that's based on genuine partnership instead of professional networking. That one might take some practice. Good thing I have time to learn." Mark's kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise, all the time in the world. Outside, snow began to fall again, adding to the magical atmosphere of Christmas Eve at the Lakeside Lodge. Inside, by By the warmth of the fire, Jessica Thorne discovered that the best adventures begin when you stop planning every detail and start trusting your heart to lead the way. December 24th at the Lakeside Lodge dawned clear and bright, with the kind of perfect winter weather that made Jessica grateful every morning that she'd chosen to make this magical place her home. She stood at the kitchen window of the cozy cabin she now shared with Mark, watching him split firewood outside while their rescue dog, Pine, named for obvious reasons, supervised from a sunny patch of snow. The past year had been a whirlwind of changes, challenges, and discoveries that had transformed her life in ways she never could have imagined. Jessica Thorne Events had evolved into Lakeside Celebrations, a boutique wedding planning company that specialized in authentic mountain weddings and attracted couples from all over the country who wanted something real instead of just impressive. "Coffee's ready," Mark called from the kitchen, and Jessica turned to find him holding 2 steaming mugs and wearing the kind of contented smile that still made her heart skip after a year together. "Thank you," she said, accepting the coffee and the good morning kiss that came with it. "Any word from royalty and Marco? They should be here around noon." Flying in from San Francisco, then driving up from the city, Jessica felt a flutter of excitement. Royalty and Marco were returning to the lodge to celebrate their first wedding anniversary, and they'd asked Jessica to help them plan a small renewal ceremony for their families. It would be the first time she'd seen them since their wedding day, and she was eager to hear about their first year of marriage. "Fernanda's already started on the anniversary cake," Mark continued. "She's been talking about it for weeks." Jessica laughed. "She's more excited about this than they are. She loves those two. We all do." The lodge had indeed become home to Jessica in ways that went far beyond just living in the mountains. The community of Pine Valley had welcomed her with open arms, and she'd found herself becoming part of the network of local businesses that supported each other and celebrated together. Fiona Wright had become not just a vendor, but a close friend, and they'd collaborated on dozens of weddings throughout the year. Fernanda had taught Jessica to cook with mixed results, and the Pine Valley musicians had become the soundtrack to many magical mountain celebrations. "Speaking of celebrations," Mark said, settling beside her at the kitchen table, "have you decided what you want to do for our own anniversary?" Jessica and Mark had been officially together for exactly 1 year, counting from the night she decided to stay at the lodge instead of returning to the city. They'd moved in together in the spring, adopting Pine from a local animal rescue and settling into a rhythm of life that balanced work and play in ways Jessica had never thought possible. "Surprise me," she said. "I've learned to appreciate the unplanned moments." Mark's grin was slightly wicked, dangerous words from someone who used to plan everything 6 months in advance. That was the old Jessica. The new Jessica is much more flexible. The new Jessica is perfect. Jessica had indeed learned to be more flexible, though it had been a process that required patience from both of them. She still made lists and organized details, but she'd also learned to embrace spontaneity and roll with changes in ways that had made her both a better event planner and a happier person. "What time do the Hendersons arrive?" Mark asked, checking his phone. The Hendersons were getting married at the lodge on New Year's Eve, a young couple from Denver who'd found Jessica through Royalty's enthusiastic online reviews. It would be Jessica's 20th wedding at the lodge, and she still got excited about each one. 2 o'clock. They want to see the setup for the ceremony and taste Fernanda's cake options. And the Murphy wedding next weekend? Everything's confirmed. Flowers from Fiona, music from Yusef's band, and Fernanda's already planning the menu. Jessica's business had grown steadily throughout the year, built on word-of-mouth recommendations from delighted couples and a reputation for creating authentic, meaningful celebrations. She made less money than she had in the city, but she also had less stress, more satisfaction, and a life that felt balanced and sustainable. "I still can't believe this is my job," she said, looking out at the snow-covered landscape that served as the backdrop for her work. "What do you mean?" "A year ago, planning events felt like a constant crisis. Now it feels like joy. Like I get to help people celebrate the most important day of their lives in the most beautiful place on earth. That's because you're doing it for the right reasons now." Jessica understood what he meant. Her city career had been driven by ambition, competition, and the need to prove herself in a demanding industry. Her mountain business was driven by love. Love for the couples she worked with, love for the community that supported her, and love for the place that had become home. The morning passed quickly as they prepared for their guests. Jessica reviewed timelines and vendor confirmations, while Mark checked the guest cabins and made sure the grounds were ready for the anniversary celebration. It had become their familiar dance, working together toward a common goal while maintaining their individual strengths and responsibilities. At noon exactly, a familiar silver SUV pulled into the lodge's parking area, and Jessica felt her heart leap with excitement. Royalty and Marco emerged from the vehicle looking tanned, relaxed, and obviously happy. They moved toward each other automatically, the way couples do when they've learned to navigate the world as a team. Jessica! Royalty ran across the snow to embrace her former wedding planner. You look amazing! Mountain life clearly agrees with you. It really does, Jessica replied, meaning it completely. You two look wonderful. Marriage suits you. It's been the best year of my life, Marco said, joining the embrace, and it all started here. The next hour was spent catching up on their year. Marco's photography career was flourishing. Royalty had left her father's company to start a nonprofit focused on environmental conservation. And they'd bought a house in Marin County with a view of the mountains. We think about this place all the time, Royalty said as they toured the lodge. It changed something for us, you know? Made us think differently about what really matters. What do you mean? Jessica asked. The wedding was so perfect because it felt real, like it was about us and our love instead of just creating an impressive event. And that feeling has carried into our marriage. We've tried to approach everything this year the way we approached the wedding, Marco added. Focus on what's authentic instead of what looks good to other people. Jessica felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was why she'd changed her approach to event planning, to create celebrations that enhanced relationships instead of just showcasing them. Speaking of authentic, Royalty said with a mischievous smile, we have some news to share. She and Marco exchanged a look that made Jessica's heart skip with anticipation. We're pregnant, Royalty announced. Just found out last week. Jessica squealed with delight, immediately pulling them both into another embrace. That's wonderful! When are you due? August. And we're hoping. Royalty looked at Marco, who nodded encouragingly. We're hoping you might consider planning a baby blessing ceremony for us. Here at the lodge, of course. Are you serious? Completely serious. This place is special for us. We want to mark all our important milestones here. Jessica felt tears of happiness threatening. In the city, her relationships with clients had been professional and temporary. Here, she was becoming part of people's ongoing stories, witnessing their journeys through all of life's important moments. I would be honored, she said, absolutely honored. The afternoon passed in a blur of planning discussions, menu tastings, and reminiscing about the previous year's wedding. As evening approached, they gathered in the great room for the anniversary dinner that Fernanda had been planning for weeks. The meal was a feast of mountain comfort food, roasted chicken with herbs from Fernanda's garden, root vegetables glazed with local honey, and fresh bread that filled the lodge with the scent of home. The anniversary cake was a smaller version of the wedding cake, decorated with fresh berries and pine sprigs that brought back memories of that magical Christmas Eve celebration. A toast, Mark said, raising his glass of wine as they gathered around the table, to Royalty and Marco, whose love story began here and continues to inspire everyone who knows them. And to Jessica and Mark, Royalty added, who showed us what it looks like when work becomes passion and colleagues become family. As they clinked glasses in the warm glow of the fireplace, Jessica felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the path that had brought her to this moment. A year ago, she'd been a stressed, lonely workaholic planning events that felt more like performance pieces than celebrations. Now she was surrounded by people she loved, doing work that felt meaningful, in a place that had become home. What are you thinking about? Mark asked quietly as the evening wound down. Just everything. How different my life is now. How happy I am. Any regrets? Jessica considered the question seriously. She'd given up financial security, professional prestige, and the excitement of city life. But in return, she'd gained authentic relationships, meaningful work, and a sense of peace she'd never known was possible. "None," she said firmly. "Not a single one." Later that night, as she and Mark walked home to their cabin under a sky brilliant with stars, Jessica reflected on the journey that had brought her to this place. It had started with a wedding crisis and a reluctant trip to a mountain lodge. It had continued with a series of disasters that had forced her to let go of control and embrace the unexpected. And it had led to a life she never could have planned, but couldn't imagine living any other way. "Mark," she said as they reached their front door. "Yeah? Thank you for teaching me that sometimes the best things happen when we stop trying to control every detail. Thank you for being brave enough to take the risk." Inside their cozy cabin, with Pine curled up by the fireplace and the mountains standing guard outside their windows, Jessica Thorne settled into the life she'd never known she wanted and couldn't imagine leaving behind. Christmas morning would bring new adventures, new celebrations to plan, and new opportunities to help couples create authentic, meaningful beginnings to their marriages. But tonight, she was content to simply be present in this perfect moment, surrounded by love and possibility and the quiet magic of the mountains. Sometimes, she reflected as Mark's arms came around her, the most important events aren't the ones you plan. They're the ones that happen when you finally stop planning and start living. And so ends our Christmas tale of Jessica and Mark, whose love story bloomed like winter roses in the mountain snow. May their journey remind you that sometimes the greatest adventures begin when we let go of our need to control every detail and trust our hearts to guide us home. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you too can imagine waking up to snow-covered mountains, the scent of pine and cinnamon, and the warm embrace of someone who sees the real you. In the quiet magic of Christmas dreams, all things are possible, and every ending is really just a beautiful beginning. Sweet dreams, and thank you for joining us at Christmas Stories for Sleep. Until next time, may your holidays be filled with love, laughter, and just the right amount of Christmas magic.